Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Gutierrez, and I'm a project manager with the Massachusetts Digital Services team.
I'm Cogbill. I'm a content strategist with MA Digital Services.
And we're speaking today about our work over the last year on the Mass.gov project. The Mass.gov project is a total redesign of the Commonwealth's website. We moved from a legacy percussion site to a Drupal 8 site. We produced our first test pages in the fall of 2016, officially launched 1 year ago in the fall of 2017, and today more than 95% of our traffic is on the new site. Today we want to tell you about our roles in this work. Our jobs have been to scale the digital services vision for constituent-centered content through our training and support of the Mass.gov content authors and editors. This is the story of our journey from a reactive Mass.gov customer support model to a proactive Mass.gov customer success model. For us, when we say customers, we mean state employees that are the Mass.gov authors and editors. We're focusing on two related subjects today. First, at the heart of the redesign was a new vision for Mass.gov. It was centered around government service and a unified, consistent voice. We wanted the voice to be helpful, human, dignified, modern, and most importantly, constituent-centered. We wanted web content to clarify who it was for and what they could do with it. People before processes, that sort of thing. But since we do work in government, we also want to talk about process. The content through which this consistent voice would speak was going to be created by roughly 600 different people across more than 140 state organizations. We want to tell you about what working with those people was like and how we worked with them to adopt the Mass.gov voice, where we've made progress, where we've stumbled, and the lessons that we have learned along the way.
But before any of that happened, we needed to move content. So there were tens of thousands of pages on our old site, and we wanted to move their content and the millions of page views they got to the new Mass.gov. So this wasn't a copy-paste job. The new Mass.gov came with this new philosophy. We wanted to be constituent-centered. Constituent-centered sounds like a really nice way to be, and it is. I used to be a teacher, and I really tried to be student-centered. In both cases, the point is to think about who you're working for, how you can improve their experiences, and maybe even how you can improve their lives. But the philosophy was also a really big change. We were going to try and do things pretty differently. Constituent-centered means trying to meet constituents where they are. For example, don't assume intricate knowledge of state government, the structure and the hierarchy. Strip away as much governmentalese, legalese, technocratic, and bureaucratic language as possible. Content should flow from the question, what does this help the constituent do? And the biggest change, the new site was going to be structured around services, not around individual state organizations. There are lots of reasons change is difficult. Two of these are the following. First, you have to persuade people that change is worth it, and you have to listen when they tell you what you're overlooking. So persuading authors and editors that the new Mass.gov philosophy was a good thing wasn't the hard part. Constituent-centered, as I said, sounds like what everybody wants to do after all. The hard work began when authors began asking questions like, what does this mean for my content? Or what exactly is a service? Is jury duty a service? Is our whole law library a service? It sounds like we're going to have to totally reimagine the information architecture for our web content. Is that true? And then they also wanted to know, of course, how long do we have to accomplish this? And the answer to that last one was usually as quickly as you can. Sometimes they resisted, and they had good reasons. They wanted content types we hadn't made yet, and they wanted authoring tools that would help them do the very thing we wanted them to do, make constituent-centered content, but they weren't available yet.
Something to know about all of this persuading and listening we were doing is that it mostly happened in one-on-one settings. Sometimes these were in person, but most were one-on-one via our email support inbox. Let me tell you a little bit about communicating via this email support inbox. By the end of September of last year, there were approximately 500 authors who relied on it. And who was on the other end? Well, in August, I got back from a wonderful vacation in Brazil and realized that I was on the other end of it. We had a couple of content-focused people that had been staffed part-time in the inbox, but it had become clear that we needed more than that. So there was me, a tech support expert who happened to leave on vacation right when I came back, one developer, and 5 hours of one content strategist person's time per week. We were getting on average 20 emails a day, and soon our backlog was around 150 questions, give or take. Let me tell you a little bit about what these emails were. So, how does TFA work? What is TFA? And do I have to have it? How do I add an address and contact information on this page? Why did my TFA stop working? Here's a bug. What new content type should I use for this old content? Here's another bug. Why did you make the font that color? My TFA stopped working and I need to get into my account yesterday. Please help me. Here are 3 more bugs. Why is that box there instead of 6 pixels to the left? What is wrong with that image? Can you please come to my office to help me set up my TFA? There were a lot of also very technical questions, design questions, content questions, and product roadmap questions. To be clear, these were all really, really important questions that we were getting from our authors that were actually taking us seriously in this content migration. They wanted to know how to make very technical content and very complex content easy to understand. To answer them though, what we had to do is we had to find the time to meet with the right internal team member, get an answer from them, and then go back and answer our customers' questions. As we got closer to our DNS switch, when we'd officially freeze authoring on the Percussion site, we got more and more support requests. Agencies were adding new authors and editors, and they needed training. We also were releasing code multiple times a week. We were releasing new content types every month, and these generated questions, feature requests, bug reports. One comms director routinely sent us one email every 2 weeks, but these emails were made up of a huge spreadsheet of every single question his organization had about the redesign. So you've heard the metaphor about building a plane while flying it. That is what it felt like, except that we had travelers parachuting in every couple 100 miles. We had to build them seats and get the one stewardess to bring them drinks and show them how to use a seatbelt.
So if the only thing we were trying to do was just answer support questions as quickly as possible, this wouldn't have been quite as tough. But our goal wasn't just to tell authors and editors that new stuff was coming out. We were still spreading the word about what it meant to be constituent-centered and what constituent-centered content looked like. So that meant we weren't just saying what something did, we were also trying to frame everything in terms of how it affected the constituent's experience. And something that's maybe obvious about framing your answer that way is that if you're going to frame things in terms of the constituent's experience, you first have to understand the constituent's experience. So here's an illustration of what I mean. So I remember an author came to us with a question about organizing the hunting content on Mass.gov. And I remember giving what I thought was a pretty simple constituent-centered answer. What kinds of questions do constituents have about hunting? Where do they start? What do they want to do? But then it turned out that hunting information is detailed. I think I assumed you need a page on deer, you need one on bears and one on turkeys, and then you need the transaction for the hunting licenses, and we'll group all these together in a nice, neat service, and we'll call that service hunting, and we'll stick that in a topic called hunting and fishing. It's going to be great. Those of you who hunt, I don't know if there's any hunters in the room, but you already know that I wasn't even close. So you do need a page on deer hunting. You need a landing page where all the other deer hunting information is going to live. So you need deer harvest data, you need deer hunting regulations and season dates. You need a transaction for reporting your deer harvest, which is the technical term for when you shoot a deer. You need deer hunting permits. You need antlerless deer hunting permits. An antlerless deer is a deer that doesn't have antlers. Or if you're like, why don't you just say doe permits? It's because it's also a male deer with antlers that are fewer than 3 inches. So you also need info on deer hunting for paraplegic hunters, youth deer hunt day, pages on deer hunting for population management in different state parks. There's a page on related issues to chronic wasting disease, which is the disease that kills deer. So then anyway, you also need all of that for bears and turkeys. And then you also need it for ducks, quail, squirrel, rabbits, pheasant, coyote, fox, bobcat, and possum, and raccoon. So there's slightly different regulations for each, slightly different sets of things that you do. There's different seasons and different ways to hunt them. So what I'm getting at is, if you work in digital government, you have an information architecture challenge by default. There's a lot of information. Even if you strip away all the governmentalese and legalese and technical jargon, even if you design services such that constituents have similar experiences across all the different types of services, even if you configure content around constituent needs, you still have this large volume of information to configure and that you need to work with authors to organize. We learn that giving advice in any situation is predicated on trust and working relationships. It doesn't matter how good your advice is if someone doesn't trust you or takes a doubtful stance towards everything you say. And this meant that every interaction became a chance to build that trust. We tried to take every email seriously. We tried to keep track of who had asked us for something, even if they'd asked months ago, to show that we were paying attention. We followed up when we didn't hear back to prove that we really did care how their work was going. And if this makes it sound like it was partly a performance, that's because it was. Good listening is part performance. It's both listening and making sure that others know they're being listened to.
So for an organization to listen, and to listen to 500 content creators, it needs a process. This is where we talk about process. When I first tried to wrap my mind around what we could do to improve our support system, our inbox, here are the problems that I came up with. There were a lot of emails and a lot of back and forth between our customers and ourselves. And some of these were slipping through the cracks unanswered. You can't build trust if customers don't feel listened to. And customers can't create constituent-centered content if we don't answer their questions about what it is. So we had to fix that. We didn't have a system for triaging and categorizing these requests. This made it harder to know which issues were causing us the most trouble and which team member we could go to get the right answers. You also don't build relationships through misleading or inaccurate information. So we had to fix that too. We had no data. We didn't know the most frequent questions, who emailed us most often, which questions took the longest to answer, or the total volume of work it would take for us to answer all of these questions. We needed to know who needed the most help so we could partner our content strategists with them most efficiently. Something we like to say on the Mass.gov team is that you can't manage what you can't measure. So to start to wrap our minds around what we needed to do to improve customer support, to go from reactive to proactive, was to gather some data about what was happening in our inbox. We realized that we could divide all of our support requests into two broad categories: tech user support and then everything else. The tech user support questions were questions like, can you create an account? Can you update my permissions? Can you help me set up my TFA? Of course. How do I reset my password, and why can't I log in? We had two wonderful people on our team that responded to these questions, and we had a weekly throughput of 100%. So that was not the problem area. The real problem was the everything else. And the everything else was actually where we were trying to create change in state government. To deal with these, we created a post-it for every single email in our inbox. The post-its were color-coded based on level of difficulty. Then we created a Kanban board in a whiteboard, and we went to town visualizing all of the questions. Every couple of hours, I would update our board with new tickets. And at the end of each day, I asked the content team member spending time on support, usually Adam, to go and move his tickets. After 2 weeks of this, we had data. And we realized that we had a throughput of 24%, and that was not okay. Unfortunately, this everything else was a part of our work where we scaled our voice. It was where we worked with content creators to think of their services through a constituent-centered lens, explained how the content types worked, how they were designed around services, and explained how to use our different authoring tools to improve the content that they were creating. So it was very important that we were able to communicate with them efficiently and clearly. It would also have been good if we got back to them in time for them to remember what they had emailed us about. So we needed to change the way we communicated our purpose of the redesign and what the Mass.gov voice was. To address these needs, we proposed a distributed support model within the office, where every single digital services team member spent 30 minutes a day answering questions. This allowed us to send support questions directly to our team members that were experts in different areas and who had the answers. And it also helped us to have more people responding, get rid of our backlog. To make sure that nothing fell through the cracks, I tracked every single email on a spreadsheet that you see here. We piloted this model, asked for feedback, tweaked it, got some more feedback from our team, tweaked it some more, and this is still actually the model that we're using today. In case you're wondering how we got the entire team to spend time doing support questions, the answer was to ask very nicely, ask again, remind, ask some more, and I also made badges. And then I left them on team members' desks every day to remind them to their customer support questions or when they had done a good job. Turns out Boy Scouts are onto something. People really like them. Eventually, we did get an official ticketing tool. Our executive office rolled out a system called ServiceNow, and we were able to use it instead of spreadsheets. Thank goodness. Here's what we learned from taking the time to build this support process instead of immediately going to a ticketing system. First, having one person see every single email that came or went helped us really understand who our customers was. It gave us both depth and breadth in terms of what their questions were, the range of needs, and the range of answers we needed to start providing. Second, we learned that customers really thrived when we had personal interactions with them, even if it was only through email. Knowing who they were and being able to refer to specific challenges that we knew that they had or the organization had, it meant a lot to them. All of this helped us build the trust and establish a productive working relationship with them. And that's what helped when we needed to offer content criticism, advice, or request that they make a change on their content. I'm happy to say that now, on average, we resolve 80% of our requests within 2 business days. Some of this has been tedious, overwhelming work. The tracking spreadsheet was really, for a long, long time, my best friend in the office. But we needed to establish this process that we could use to communicate effectively with our customers. And it was a key step in scaling our voice. It also wasn't enough. Answering support questions, by definition, is reactive. And we wanted to get to proactive, from a customer support model to a customer success model. So we needed to find other ways to get our voice and vision out to these content creators. We needed a product information team.
Hello, we're Adam and Julie. We're also the product information team. So I like to think of us as a pop-up communications team. It's not our main role, but we switch into it whenever we need to. So our product information strategy was informed by the same as our Mass.gov strategy in a way. It had to be customer-centered. had to understand what they cared about, what their needs were, and it had to be in the service of helping them make better content. We also needed to make sure that we accommodated all the different types of backgrounds that our various 500 to 600 authors had at any given moment. So some had been creating content for 15 years, others just for months. Some had marketing or tech backgrounds, others IT, others were event planners actually, and others were researchers who had just happened to luck into a new responsibility. So what we did, first we began sending regular email newsletters. We filled these with information about new features and new content types, made large-scale asks of authors, such as, could you please redirect all your pages? We announced trainings. We recruited survey and interview participants. We also started offering one-on-one content strategy sessions and one-on-one using data to improve your content sessions. These were 30-minute to 1-hour sessions in which we helped authors learn to use the CMS, work through difficult content strategy problems, or offered editorial advice. So this is the part where our comms team becomes kind of our outreach team also. And then we created a knowledge base. So the Mass.gov CMS was getting bigger and more powerful. For context, we have about 20 different content types that authors who jump in now will be using. And we needed to document what all this could do. So the content types were designed to make constituent-centered content a reality, but only if you use them as they were intended. And in the earliest stages of the process, authors sometimes pick content types based on if it had some element that they really wanted. So maybe they had some really, really long page that had been a parking lot for miscellaneous information in the old system. And what we hoped they would do is reevaluate how useful this information had been and how useful its structure had been. Maybe restructure it, maybe eliminate it if it turned out not to be useful, maybe just add the right kind of context. And what actually happened was that often they picked a content type because it came with a specific element that allowed them to keep their old structure intact. And this is how we ended up with lists of links and transactional content types, or staff directories and guides because there were anchor links.
I see them nodding.
Yeah. Some authors also avoided content types entirely if they didn't understand what the purpose was, if we hadn't communicated clearly enough what you could use it to do. So we ended up with about a 50-item knowledge base, how to use our content types, how to use the various authoring tools released, some basic writing and style advice. And today these have generated about 14,000 views over the past year, which seems pretty good considering that our authoring community is about 600 authors, of which several hundred are frequently active.
It's also publicly available if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
URLs up there.
We also publish release notes twice a week. In these, we take the release notes our tech team produces internally, and we rewrite them so they are appropriate for a broader audience. Following these releases closely also helps us manage our knowledge base, since every time something new comes out, we're immediately aware of it, and we know that we need to update all the affected knowledge base items.
And quick plug, actually. So we're working with our development team on creating an author landing homepage when they first log in that will pull up these release notes into the landing page.
So you don't have to just remember to visit the page.
Yeah,
Should be
it'll
nice.
be there when you log in.
Can you go back to the URL for the...
Yeah,
Is it on that?
yeah. Mass.gov.digital.gitbook.io.
Yeah. Also,
Cool.
one more. Yeah. It's also worth mentioning here our attempt to use the tour module, which is a core module in Drupal 8.
How many of you...
Anybody used, just show of hands, how many people have used the tour module? Okay, so a couple. One back there.
Kelly was working with us on the tour module.
So the tour module is what it sounds like. It's a succession of pop-ups that highlight and explain important aspects of some new feature or functionality. So to really adapt it to our system would have required a little more technical and development work than our small team had available. Often a knowledge-based post was just, with screenshots, was often just a lower lift. We think there might be a good use for tour down the road, maybe with introducing a brand new content type, for example, but we just haven't quite found a use for it yet. All that said, we're pretty sure we can do more. Our research shows that our product information makes for good news and reference materials, but it doesn't help authors troubleshoot problems that come up while they work. These are often like the most in-depth and contextual, and so they require a lot to work out over email. You can kind of imagine, I was doing this exact thing at this exact moment when this thing happened to me. And then you have to go back and forth. What was the URL? What time did this happen?
And send us a screenshot so you can see what you were saying.
So we'd like to eliminate some of those. So there's a lot more guidance we could provide, everything from try looking at your content using your mobile phone to see what it looks like for users. They're not all on desktops using Internet Explorer. To here's what an aspect ratio is and why it matters to you, and how to come up with an editorial process for your organization. So to do the work of supporting all these content authors from 140 plus different organizations, we needed two competing mindsets, which makes this kind of a balancing act. So first, you need empathy. Lots of ways to define empathy, but the one that I like and that I'm drawing from here is from American psychologist Carl Rogers, who defines it as trying to assume another's internal frame of reference. And for Rogers, empathy doesn't just mean that you understand where someone's coming from. It means actually journeying along with them as they tell you what they're struggling with, even if it doesn't actually make any sense to you. You're just trying to follow along. And through this journey, you eventually get some insight into what they think and how they feel and why they are saying the things they're saying and framing things in the way they're framing them. This is really hard, it's difficult to measure, and it requires flexibility and being open to possibility. I also think it's really healthy since it requires you to add nuance to what you know is true, to come up with new creative solutions. But second, you also need to commit to your principles. In practice, this means saying no with logic and sensitivity. It means suggesting alternatives and workarounds. It means finding ways to remind partners what everybody's shared goal is. And if this sounds parental, that's because sometimes it kind of is. We couldn't have done this redesign without a fair amount of governance.
We also needed a strong process that was informed by and connected to our purpose. So not processes for processes' sake, but a process to make our work more efficient, meaningful, and predictable. Creating a process for support also opened up new opportunities. As we began addressing customer questions more efficiently, we realized that we could also create product information that answered these questions before they even had them. And we also knew more about what those questions were going to be. It also gave us the time and space to come up with new ways for interacting with our customers. We needed to do more than just teach. We really needed to converse, to dialogue. Recently, we began planning our first ever content conference, or ConCon, where authors and editors will come together to share knowledge and collaborate. We're also forming communities of practice, or groups of like-minded content creators who meet in person and also remotely to discuss strategies and challenges. To us, going from customer support to customer success meant establishing these relationships with authors and editors, characterized by trust and collaboration. It meant anticipating their needs instead of being surprised by them. We wanted to be the wind beneath our customers' wings. Or, since this is state government, we wanted to be the non-smear ink with which they crossed their T's and dotted their I's. Thanks for listening. So I know that we have 15 minutes left, I think. So if there are any questions, we're happy to take them. Yes, hi.
So how do you deal with people that say, but I've always done it this way?
Yeah, Adam, want to take this one?
I think it really does kind of depend on the person, but usually is, in my experience, it's a matter of sitting down, hearing, what are you trying to do? And often that question of what are you trying to do reframes the conversation away from what is the process that you've been following to you have a goal, and everybody's goal usually actually is something constituent-centered. And if we can frame it in terms of you want to do something that serves constituents, we can come up with new, maybe better ways to do it. I also have never met anybody who didn't have a frustration that we couldn't talk through or use something to gain trust, right? Some way that you could address some part of their work that was frustrating.
And when we do encounter those situations, we really move away from just communicating via the support ticket, make sure we give them a call, make sure we have them come in for office hours. Actually, Adam last week was down at a Mass.gov author's office to teach her how to log in for the first time and things like that. And so going back and remembering that having this productive working relationship requires time, energy, and effort on your part, and that trying to understand where your shared goals are, and then from there work backwards to what are the different ways you can do to achieve that goal, has been sort of a working strategy for us so far. Yeah. We'll take, you and then over here. Sure.
Can you talk more about the governance part of it, kind of the communication from the top that this is important and important to the organization, because that had to provide the aircraft. This is an impossible job you guys set up.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about that and what aircraft that provided, any tools or pieces of that that were part of the whole project?
Sure. So the question was talking a little bit more about the governance of. So we actually had before, and Brian, feel free to speak to this because some of this was right before my time. But before we started the project, there was an incredible amount of work that went in at the highest levels through road shows, through having support from our leadership to go and speak to all of the different secretariats. And also we have independent offices in our website as well. And so there was this big process of communicating what the vision was, what the change was, and bringing people along, getting them on board at the highest levels. And then once that sort of took off, was when we sort of came in and bringing people along from the bottom up, from the authors up. But yes, none of this would have been possible without all of the support and with all of the work that went into at the highest levels to explain the new vision and to get people on board. The governance structure is different, whereas in our percussion site, different authors and editors had only access to their content. Our model is everyone has access to everyone's content. So there was certainly a time last year where that was a big worry for some people. We've put in all of the right things in place, watch reports. We have the contacting an author module set up so you can speak with different authors if you want to make a content change. And we've been pretty good about reminding them about asking other authors before you make content changes. We really haven't had a situation where that's been a big issue at all.
Yeah, I've got two small points to that. So one is all the content is in one centralized place. And so sometimes if we know that we need to do something that's going to affect everybody, part of the issue is not so much that whether or not we can do it, but communicating so that everybody is prepared for it. If we make some change that's going to affect...
The red button, sorry.
Oh.
Turned off just now. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank
If we
you.
make some change that's going to affect everybody, it's just going to happen because we're going to make one change and the entire CMS will be affected. And so then you just have to make sure that you explain to everybody what's going to happen. Here's what you can do. And the last part is there's actually a fair amount of managing up. Every time you meet with authors or every time you write to the people who are actually creating the content, you're also giving them tools to speak to the folks right above them and to make their own arguments about how they can do this. So part of the building trust was actually to make sure that the folks who are actually writing and creating content were able to tell their bosses, like, no, this is really important. Please trust me. Like, we need to do this.
Yeah, and one of the ways by which we do that is we have the ability for constituents to leave feedback at the bottom of every single page. And one of the authoring tools that we have is like the feedback manager. And so authors can go in and browse through all of the feedback that their pages have been getting. And we have a number of stories from our authors that actually use those pieces of feedback to go up to either the subject matter experts, if it's the web liaisons that are doing the editing in the CMS, or to their supervisors and say, hey, we actually do need to make this change and change from this type of language to this other because like 25,000 or X number of feedback says that they can't find this link or they don't understand this language. So that has been helpful too.
So there and there.
Yeah.
Are you guys still a staff of 2.125?
No, we
Yeah.
are currently us two. We are 4.5
Okay.
as of now.
Okay, so if you go from like, can you give like just a brief overview of
Yeah.
module discovery or whatever, analysis discovery to implementation?
Sure, for like the customer success project work.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of how you developed your site.
Oh, the site.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What I said 4.5 is only the customer success
Oh, okay.
team.
So then there's.
Yes.
So you would make requests to the technical team.
Right. So we have two project teams that are tech teams. One of them is for the like for the front-facing part of it. The second team is the platform support and the editorial experience technical team. We also have a content performance team that is made up of content strategies and of our data folks. And then we have a design team that it sprinkles throughout the development teams that works on the creation of this.
So would you say that this is rather headless or not in terms of your CMS?
No, it is currently not headless, but we are,
I'm getting there.
those are conversations we're having.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. All right. Yes, of course.
So just to tie back into the in-page feedback, because we're at the very beginning of this at Commerce for Commerce.gov, opening up to more editors.
Right.
So we're doing in-page feedback that we're definitely going to give an overview to page editors. But how do you handle like Google Analytics or like site improve, like broken link reports and stuff? Do editors go to those third-party analytic sources? Do you pull in key stats to show them in the back end? How do you handle that?
So it's a mix. So in earlier, the answer is kind of both and. Earlier in the project, you could get a Google Analytics login, you could get a Site Improve login, and one of the challenges with that is that people have to do it. And GA is it's a little overwhelming if you've never seen it. I remember in one conversation with somebody going, I don't do charts, I don't do graphs, and so that person was not going to go into GA. So so those are there if authors want them.
And honestly, like the power authors do still use them.
Yeah.
Very proactively.
But for the other several hundred, we've been building things into the CMS, authoring tools into the CMS. So we just released analytics dashboards that try and make really it's sort of an abstract of a GA, if you will, and it gives you like really high level, easy to understand stats. And if they wanted to dig in, they could. And then it also tells you, for example, how many broken links are on the page that's coming from Site Improve. And they do have to go into Site Improve to actually see where they are, or they could just go to the page to look at it. But so we're trying to kind of lead everybody with tools that are kind of intermediate.
And what we did with these analytics dashboards is that they are embedded within each of the pages. So there's a tab that says Analytics Dashboards, and it pulls up and it's slurping up the data from Google Analytics and from Site Improve. We structured it around this like a scoring system where we have different outcomes that are important, findability, satisfaction, and things like that. And there's different indicators that we're using for that. Yeah,
so put the tools where people's faces are pointed.
sure.
I'll just make a quick shameless plug. Brian Hirsch, I'll show some screenshots of those screens tomorrow on our presentation.
Yes, of course. Yeah, tomorrow at 2 o'clock in balcony A.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 2 questions. One's really quick. Did your line item budget for Post-it notes go up?
There are so many in a closet somewhere.
No, second question, I see that you're using MailChimp for the notification for
We-
the newsletter.
We are.
So do you sign up new employees or new content editors, or do they manually do that, or what's the process?
That's a great question. We actually just redid our process a couple of weeks ago. We have a newsletter registration sign-up link where different stakeholders that don't necessarily have user CMS accounts can get information from. So this is a lot of like the comms directors or the managers of the people that are the authors. And so over the past year and a half, they've been wanting to know some of these like redesign updates. But for all of the authors and editors, the second they get a new account with us, we get an account for them for our ticketing system in ServiceNow, and we add them to our newsletter.
If it's really important, we mail merge, and if it's really, really, really important, we write individualized emails, even if it's to a lot of people, just because we need them to pay attention. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Is the knowledge base publicly available or is it the internet?
The knowledge base is publicly available. changed the URL yesterday, and so let me see if I remember it by memory, but it's Mass.gov digital. Yeah, we can go back to it.
Yeah. Is it in your presentation?
It is in our presentation. At the top, a little bit small. But let's
So
see.
is that it right there?
No,
That
one
was
more.
it?
There.
Oh, one more.
Yeah, there. Nope.
Nope.
Nope. You're right. You're right.
I can't see what's happening on the screen.
There you
it is.
go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no, that's the old URL.
Ooh,
It's
shoot.
mass library.
I think,
So
I think it will
redirects you.
redirect by itself, so you should be okay with that one.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes?
I thought I had seen a hand over here in the front, maybe not. Yes. Hi.
So thinking about people using the site, can you search the knowledge base, like type in a word and it gives you all of the
Yes. Actually, look at that. It's about to do it.
super.
Look at that. Yeah, so we actually just made the move to Gitbook as our knowledge base repository
We were on Medium.
2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
Literally,
maybe?
we actually just announced it like this morning. So.
Yes, actually, this
Yeah.
afternoon to our customers. For a year, we were using Medium to post all of these articles, and we quickly came to the conclusion that for like navigability and search purposes of information, it was really, really hard for authors. And so over the past 2 months, we did research with our customers to figure out what it was that they needed out of a knowledge base. And out of that is our version 2 of knowledge base, which is in Gitbook. Yeah. Yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be great. Any last questions? Yes.
You mentioned that people were using content types incorrectly.
Mhm.
Are you reviewing pages at all? Is anyone going through?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a team dedicated to improving content. There are like, so if you don't count the redirects, there are something like 30,000 pages on Mass.gov, and so can't review all of them, obviously. But if you start with the ones that are just the most trafficked and the highest impact, then you can kind of go through those and see could we work with these authors to improve them. And we've started with the core service suite pages, the ones that are just about services. And after we go through those and make sure the top traffic ones are working well, we'll kind of expand out to some of the other ones. And there are certain content types that we just happen to know are a little challenging or that we didn't communicate as well about as we now would have. So yeah, it's sort of a targeted effort.
Yeah. Yes.
So sometimes I struggle to balance, like I want good quality content, but then I also want a lot of people to contribute content. And I, worry if you correct somebody too much, does that discourage them from contributing in the future? I don't know if you guys have found
So
this.
I'm going to tell you one example of an email I received on Friday from one of our customers. They actually reached out to us about asking to get permissions to iframe a widget in one of their pages. We approve every single iframe before we allow them to do it, just to make sure that it's consistent, responsive, accessible. And in reviewing this page with the iframe, we realized that the content that actually, that could have been 2 different pages. There's a lot of content there, and it made the iframe just be small and bulky and had a right scroll bar, not great. And so in our reply to them, we're like, yes, you can iframe this, but also we recommend that maybe you change this into 2 different pages, and there's a couple of ways that we can do it. The reply was, thank you so much on it. We're always looking to get feedback from digital services on how we can use it to improve. So I really think the fact that we've been working with them and trying to understand what it is they're trying to do has really created this relationship of trust, and that it lets them take our edits more positively. I don't
It's
know if you-
really, really hard. I ask that question all the time.
Yeah.
And hence the balancing between like to make space for you, I would also like to put my foot down. Yeah.
Yeah. It is like an never-ending challenge, I would say. Yeah. All right. I think we might be at time, but thank you so
Thank you all
much.
for coming.